All right, hello everyone. Welcome to our Top Trends and Responsible Sourcing webinar for 2026. First of all, thank you all so much for joining us today for one of our most anticipated discussions of the year. My name is Chandler Thornton. I am the content marketing lead for EiQ based in Hong Kong. I'm joined today by Andy Gibbard, EiQ's Chief Customer Officer, joining from the UK, who will be leading you through the top trends today. We've got a lot of great insights to share with you, but before we get started, just a few of our normal housekeeping reminders. Just to remind you all that you will be muted throughout the discussion, but Q&A is available, so please feel free to submit any questions that come up for you throughout the discussion. We will try to get to as many of them as possible, and if we're unable to get to any of your questions, we will definitely follow up with you after. The session will also be recorded and sent to you via email in the next few days. So please be on the lookout for that. And a reminder as well that this session is based off of our top trends report that just went out recently. So we will send you the PDF, but in the meantime, if you want to take a look sooner, it's available on our website. So be sure and visit and download from there. And with that, I will hand over to Andy, who will get us going.
Thank you very much, Chandler, and thank you to everyone who's joined us today, whether you're bright and early here in Europe like me, or whether you're a bit later in the day in Asia or somewhere else. Yeah, really excited to be presenting to you our top trends for 2026. Just in terms of about these findings, we do normally do trends reports at this time of year, but this time around we wanted to do something a little bit different, and as well as providing some insights from EiQ and from our data and our thinking, we wanted this time to test the sentiment really within the responsible sourcing profession. So we surveyed 600 responsible sourcing professionals at the end of last year. We did this over 2 months, and we did that at various levels of seniority, both within some of our client organizations and beyond, but all really focused, people focused at various levels on responsible sourcing. So today we're going to look at the results from that, and we're going to look at that alongside what we see in the data, alongside the views of our experts. And with all of that, we are going to squish that all together into our 7 top trends for 2026. So first up, looking at what is shaping and reshaping sourcing and procurement, and then of course responsible sourcing really behind that. It is still tariffs. So that's not surprising if we're thinking of that in a kind of look back to 2025, but it'd be very easy to think of tariffs as a 2025 issue, at least, looking at the period that we're in now, and thinking about the turmoil that everyone really experienced really in the first half of last year. It would be easy to think that we were a little bit beyond that, at least in the current period. But recent events, even in the last few weeks and the first few weeks of 2026, have shown us that that is not the case. There have already been really significant, very high level issues of threatened or actual tariff impositions in 2026. And this is something that's highly likely to continue to shift really as the year continues. Close behind tariffs in terms of what people are telling us is impacting them is limited resources. So we'll come back to this a little bit later when we look at resources alongside budgets as well, and what people are telling us on the budgets that they have and expect to be getting going forward. But a lot of people in the responsible sourcing profession are feeling squeezed on time just to deal with their day-to-day. So when something like tariffs comes along and threatens to disrupt that and add extra pressure, this will really become very difficult. So we'll come back to that point on resources. But just to stick on tariffs for a minute, I'd just like to take a moment just to reflect on some of the specific risks and issues that creates. So often disruptions like tariffs are seen as perhaps a chance to reset, perhaps actually reduce risk in the supply chain, for example, by moving sourcing to lower risk markets, which might also be closer to home for those brands, reshaping their sourcing programs. But what we see is that actually in some of the real emerging sourcing markets that are quite often looked at in times like this, really quite a lot of them have some quite significant risks, including the ones that you see here on the screen. But that can also be the case even for home shoring and for some brands moving to domestic production. And we see really quite significant risk levels also in the US, for example, with that in mind. And when we look at US data from the EiQ perspective, we look at it state by state, and we really see that some particular states have really heightened risks for some issues. So it's really important if you are reshaping, if you're moving things around, not to make assumptions, but really to look at the data, to understand your risk profile and understand how that changes as your supply chain shifts, to make sure that you are making informed decisions and to make sure that you're continuing to invest efforts into the areas which really objectively have the highest risks.
Andy, just a quick question on this, because I feel as though this trend is certainly something a lot of our audience can relate to. We've heard in a lot of conversations that tariffs and kind of all this full scope of new responsibilities plus limited resources can be quite a challenge. So I'm just wondering what advice you might give for people that are kind of dealing with this going into the new year that feel that they just don't have enough resources to kind of tackle these issues.
Yeah, great question, Chandler. What I would say here, data is your friend, as I mentioned, but also really technology is your friend as well. And if you want to augment what you can do with your time, technology and data is really the answer. But I think for that to be effective for you, the foundations have to be there. The foundations themselves have to be really, really strong in order to really enable data and tech to have a positive effect for you. And that is actually going to lead us into our second trend. Give me a moment. Okay, all right. So after asking people about this reshaping point, we then dug into what issues are out there with collecting information from suppliers, data quality, and so on. And what we see around this specific area is that the top two issues when it comes to collecting information are data quality itself, and then also siloed data coming from disconnected, disparate sources. And this can actually tie you up in knots, and it can mean that the data and the tech itself actually has a net negative impact on what you can do if you're spending all of your time untangling it, wrestling with it, trying to connect it and getting defeated on that. That this is really comes back to that foundational point of the foundations have to be strong if this stuff is going to add value for you. So we do see some other challenges coming up here as well. There's quite a flat line actually between the top 4 issues here, but all of those 4 issues really revolve around poor, unintegrated data. And here is a quote from one of our respondents who says it's much better than I can. We run serious responsible sourcing programs, but they're still manual, fragmented, and point in time. There's no centralized, digitally enabled way to see risk, act early, bring it all together across the organization. So if you're feeling like that in your organization, what our data and what our research is telling us is that you're certainly not alone, and that there are a lot of organizations that feel like that and are looking to move forward and to add a bit of maturity to their programs. So typically when people come to us and when they are looking to do that, looking to add maturity, looking to improve how they work with data and how they work with technology, on the left here are the issues which we typically see. Firstly, fragmented sources. So we often see that people are coming to us with data locked up in all sorts of different platforms, supplier specific platforms, broader ERPs, other kind of functional platforms, third-party systems, and more, really. Secondly, then, people quite often plaster over this with manual processes, or perhaps they've not even quite got to the tech-enabled stage, and the manual processes are still the status quo. Lots of spreadsheets. I'm sure that's something that pretty much everyone can relate to in some aspect of their roles. Data locked up in email threads, version control issues coming on, and so on, and all of the issues that come from kind of point in time uploads as well, going back to like our respondent who we just quoted. All of this then, of course, just leads to error in data, issues in data, and so on. And the third issue, which we often look at when we're appraising kind of data maturity approaches, really is limited supplier visibility, whether that's incomplete data coming from suppliers, whether that's transparency and trust issues, and so on. Now, this one might stick out here slightly because you might think, well, this is a human issue. That's a collaboration, and therefore not so closely related to the data and the tech. True, but to do this at scale, and I'm sure if you're already working in this space, you will have a vast supply chain and you'll have so much data coming in. You really need the tech and the data to work to enable you to scale how you do that and to focus on the meaningful human interaction aspect. So when people come to us with these problems, we look at the practical actions that they can take to build maturity and to help to solve these issues. So 3 actions for these 3 root causes. Firstly, integration, using things like APIs to sync the data platforms and to get to a kind of single source of truth view where one system, and normally in our world, of course, EiQ, is that single source of truth with other sources feeding into or out of that single source of truth. Secondly, introducing automation, of course, to overcome issues with manual processes. That, of course, goes without saying, but using AI assists here really to either address legacy issues in that data or to facilitate better processes, quicker processes, and better data cleaning to deal with kind of incoming new data issues. And thirdly, of course, then also almost goes without saying, but digital supplier engagement, dealing with the nuts and bolts of supplier engagement with digital channels, enabling scale, and then again, enabling you to more clearly see where the challenges are, where the value add is, and where you can inject your time for good use. All right, so that is trend 2 done, and on to trend 3. We are going to look here at really the cost of non-compliance. And when we went and asked a very direct question to our respondents, and thank you, I should say, if there are those of you on the call today who've responded transparently and fully, so great to actually get this information. What we see here is that more than half of the industry is getting fined for responsible sourcing violations. And also then not insignificant number are seeing multiple violations and multiple fines falling over those hurdles again and again. So I don't know if this is surprising. It is quite shocking, I would say, and really shows here that the risk is very real. And one such penalty which is really on the rise is withhold release orders. So you might have seen some of these in the press quite recently, around the end of last year in particular, and no wonder really when you look at the trend line. These have increased year on year several times, and there's not yet an end in sight. And obviously here we're not really looking at fines, but the cost of a WRO is huge. Our research shows that the cost of a single detained shipment is typically well into the millions, something like $5 million USD on average. So if this is hitting your business, multiple times or for sustained periods, then really that cost can be really, really huge. But it would be fair for you to be wondering, with all the talk in 2025 about legislation rollback, well, isn't the risk of non-compliance actually decreasing? I mean, quite simply, no, it's not. The EU is still rolling out new and quite often more specific and more granular legislation. And many other markets, many other jurisdictions are basically doing the same thing. So for global brands with stakes in many markets, complexity is only really going to continue to increase. And so no wonder that when we ask the industry about what's driving their efforts, legislation and compliance is still really up there at the top. So responsible sourcing has not become a crisis response function. That's quite low down on our scale, and that is a good thing. But we're only part way there. We're also not yet typically seen as a strategic, transformative function. That is actually even lower down on the scale. So primarily, we are still responding, right? We're not yet really proactive. We're responding to what governments and regulators are asking of us. Not far behind that, we're responding to what our investors and stakeholders are asking of us. So probably part way there really on the journey. Some good news here then, going back to WROs. So we're not flying blind here, or at least we don't have to be flying blind here. There's a lot of rich granular data out there, including in EiQ, which we can use in a proactive, preventative way to deal with risks before we get to crisis point, before we get to legislator intervention, and before we get hit with fines and penalties. So here we're looking at Taiwan, which is a market which was directly impacted by a recent WRO. This is EiQ data, mostly on the slides, and we've been seeing and flagging high and sometimes worsening risks related to forced labour and migrant workers in particular. Forward-looking companies are already using this data to take action before it's too late. So again, data is your friends and technology is your friends when you're looking to stay compliant and to avoid the risks that come with penalties and fines. And moving on here to our next trends, the data is there, the technology is there, but really on the technology side, most people are not really yet using it fully. So we asked about multiple monitoring tools, multiple kind of tactics, if you like, which can build up a 360 approach to responsible sourcing. And what we see is that only 1 in 5, for example, are using adverse media scanning as part of their 360 approach. It's no surprise, I don't think, really, that audits is still up there as the #1 tactic. But I would say it is surprising that with all the great tech out there, that there are not a higher proportion of mature, strategic 360 approaches that do just really use everything that's available. And the other one that stood out to us here in terms of its low adoption is digital training for suppliers. Training can be great for capacity building. It can also be great for corrective action. But also it's really easy and really cost effective to deploy digital training with technology. So if you're not offering digital training to your suppliers, I'd really challenge you on that, and I'd really challenge you on why. And if you have a really good answer, I'd love to hear it in whether that's in the Q&A or afterwards as a follow-up. Back to audits, they are the gold standard in terms of getting quality data. We in EiQ really believe in audits, and they're really quite central to our data models and to our whole operating model, really. So why are we saying that they're not enough? Well, apart from being quite one-directional, this respondent actually put it perfectly for us again. Audits give you snapshots in time, but risk doesn't operate that way. By the time you see it, it's already happened. And with 20,000 suppliers, we can't audit everything. So this quote really, I think, highlights 2 key issues, or 2 key limitations, I should say, really, with audits. One being point in time. Audits are point in time by nature. There's no really getting away from that. Adverse media scanning can really offer you a constant safety net behind that. Yes, still reactive, but quick reactive and not point in time reactive. The second point here, which I think is really good, we can't audit everything. 20,000 suppliers, and that's like fairly typical really for a lot of the brands that we work with, that volume, or even quite often significantly higher. Adverse media scanning can work really well alongside other kind of lighter touch due diligence measures, for example, self-assessments. You can then take, and our clients will take these measures, and they'll apply them to lower risk areas of their supply chain that they've identified by mapping all of their risk, or to vendors, service providers, and so on, to enable them really to have that 360 approach and have a level of due diligence across a bigger, broader supply chain, and often their complete supply chains.
Andy, on this trend specifically, we've heard from a lot of clients this year just about the specific benefits of implementing sort of supplier digital learning courses and as well as the adverse media scanning. So I'm curious why you think maybe it's taking a bit longer. We're still seeing this gap from respondents about why they're not implementing yet, and also kind of what you see are the key benefits from really taking that next step to make sure that they're prioritizing these.
Yeah, thanks, Chandler, and great opportunity for me to take a quick sip of coffee there as well. I mean, the benefits of doing this, I mean, the really obvious and self-evident ones are things like alignment with with what's important to your brand, to your material issues that you've identified, and so on. But where we really see that training comes into its own, if you like, is really in this in the space of like more proactive self-improvement. If you're doing training correctly, your suppliers can access what they need to on demand, as well as what you are imposing on them. Yeah, that enables suppliers to build build capacity proactively, but for you it kind of lightens your touch there again, and just enables your suppliers to be more independent. On your other point, Chandler, in terms of the gap, why is it not there? Why are we not seeing higher percentages when we go and ask the industry? My assumption is that people think it's difficult, that people think it's more difficult than it is, or more expensive than it is to do. It's not, is what I would just say there, really. With technology, it's surprisingly straightforward to do, really, and this goes for adverse media scanning as well. From the EiQ perspective, all we really need is a list of your suppliers, and then we can really enable you to go and penetrate really your whole supply chain, or up to your whole supply chain, with training and with adverse media scanning. The training itself as well can go really, really far. We translate our courses into pretty much every language that our clients are asking for. And that really, again, just enables you to penetrate a large amount of your supply training with these tactics. All right, so four trends down, 3 to go, and we are going to come to some of your questions at the end as well. Now we're going to talk about confidence. So at EiQ, we talk about total supply chain confidence all the time. We think it's something that everyone should be trying to achieve, and we see it as a combined journey that we're on together with our clients to try and get there. So we want to ask about this, and the key finding here is that less than a quarter of our respondents told us that they are very confident in being able to detect significant risks in their supply chains. You might think that I'm being a bit cynical here, right? The green bar here is pretty big. There are a lot of people saying that they are somewhat confident in this. But I would just look at this slightly differently, really. The people that are answering this survey are the people whose job it is to detect supply chain risks. And they're the people that are really ultimately charged with protecting the people in the supply chains for their organizations. If those people can't express a high level of confidence in what's essentially their ability to do their jobs, I think that's concerning. I think all of us would like to be able to say, yes, I'm very confident in my ability to do my job with the resources I have, with the tools I have, and so on. So I do think that's a point of concern. And I do think that's where really EiQ can help. And we'll turn to that in a few minutes when we look at some of our last trends. But first, another sprinkling of good news, because I don't want to be too doom and gloom here. Good news is that almost all responsible sourcing budgets are either being maintained or increased. Very, very few budgets actually being decreased. Firstly, I think that means that management and stakeholders more broadly understand the risks. They understand the importance of what we do, and they are continuing to invest in it. And secondly, I think maybe it means that there's a bit of light at the end of the tunnel for the resource pinch we looked at earlier. So if you're in the blue bar, if your budget is increasing, then of course that can translate into resources which can start to alleviate some of that pressure, especially if you deploy that budget into data and into technology. Finally, though, if you are seeing something different. If you're in an environment where your budget is not being maintained, I'd like to think that hopefully this data point might be something that you can use to show your management how the rest of the industry is moving, and to show that perhaps they are a little bit behind. And again, if there's something that we can do to support anyone who's in that situation in terms of influencing their management and telling them more about what we see in the industry, what the possibilities are to invest in this area, please do let us know. We'd be really, really happy to do that. All right, so next up, trend 6, let's look at automation. I'm not going to linger too long on this one because it's actually quite aligned to what we've seen elsewhere. But we just see here again, really, that most programs aren't particularly mature when it comes to technology and when it comes to automation in particular. Only 1 in 5 are saying that they are using a high degree of automation. But instead of lingering on this, let's just touch a little bit on what automation means in terms of what are some of the requirements to get there. So we think that there are 4 key, really underpinning things needed for automation, to avoid tying ourselves up in knots, chasing our tails with poor data, broken processes, and thinking why, is our tech and is our data really enabling us, or is it just holding us back? So the first kind of underpinning necessity to make autonomous responsible sourcing a reality is clean and trusted data. That's the foundation of everything. What does this mean? It means relying on a single source of truth and then using technology, including AI, to clean and validate your data. The second is connectivity. So having integrated data systems that talk to each other, for example, via APIs, to feed and to enrich that single source of truth. Third is the ability to collaborate with suppliers. And again, at scale, this requires technology. It requires predefined, scalable workflows, enabling you to focus on the actual genuine collaboration and the added value human elements. And then fourth, AI augmentation from the foundations upwards to make this work, to make it work at scale and at quality, and to enable you to go faster. And that takes us to our last trends. And no surprise, we wanted to ask the world about AI. Well, in fact, we didn't ask about AI here. That's not quite correct. We asked about priorities, and we asked about enhancement opportunities and investment priorities in 2 separate parts of our questionnaire. And actually the world told us about AI, which we were really, really glad to see. So when we look at the opportunities that people see for 2026, and when we look at what people are prioritizing, AI sits at the top for both. So on the left here, we have opportunities, and on the right, we have investment priorities. And it sticks out so far from any other area in terms of opportunities for enhancement. And it also just about beats everything else, including even audit programs and assessment programs in terms of investment priorities. So this is obviously a technology point here that we're making. AI is coming, but there's also a human element here, and particularly when we're thinking about the opportunity. The technology won't run itself. We all need to adapt to the new AI-driven world, so that we can essentially drive the bus here. We as professionals need to be able to do that. So I'm just going to hop back to a couple of quotes here, which again say it much better than I can. The first being from one of our respondents, who says, "The skill set that is most urgently needed is upskilling staff to be AI experts, so they are more productive and more efficient." The only thing I'd say here is the word experts is quite strong. I don't think that everyone in our profession needs to get to the point where they feel like they are an expert in AI. But everyone, I think, needs to get to the point where they feel that AI is their friend, is their companion, where they understand what it can do from them and what they need to do to get the most out of it. And then AI is doing that augmentation and is helping you to understand, to act on your data in a way that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. The other thing that I would add to this would be, productive, yes, efficient, yes, but also effective needs to be in there as well. AI is much more than just a time-saving device, and it can really help with that contextualization, and it can actually help you to be more targeted in your actions as well as just getting more done. Two quotes. This is the first one, and just to kind of close this section, really, I'm actually just turning to a quote from our CEO, Kevin Franklin, who I really think stresses the urgency here very well. If you don't start today, you're going to be repeatedly called out over time, because no human-based team is going to be able to accommodate the volume of information and the speed of change that is now required. And there you go. I think that really says it all. And that concludes our 7 trends. But still staying on the topic of AI, I'm just going to hand you back now to Chandler, who is going to talk about something that we've been developing in this area.
Thanks, Andy. So just, of course, on the point of AI, I'm sure everyone here is already, using Copilot or ChatGPT in their everyday. And with that, we've really been innovating behind the scenes and working to sort of just continue to develop the AI for EiQ specifically, and allow for you to take all the data that's in EiQ, but be able to really quickly and specifically use it for your needs of your supply chain and your specific risks. And so with that, we just wanted to give you a quick preview of Ask EiQ, which is the chat agent for EiQ that you will be able to use to kind of, again, ask it any question regarding your supply chain data. Perhaps there's a specific sourcing region that you're interested in, or want maybe historical data on a supplier, or comparative data for regions. So you'll be able to sort of ask a question here, like the example I used, which is compare the labor and health and safety risks for sourcing textiles from India versus Bangladesh, and provide the key risk drivers from each using EiQ data. And almost instantly, you will have a sort of full comprehensive response to that, providing you with risk drivers from EiQ, the risk scores, also providing more contextual information just based on public domain data that we've been using in EiQ as well. And so this just kind of provides you with that sort of real-time information you need that's more easily digestible, and can allow you to, again, as Andy was driving home, sort of save time and really empower your sourcing decisions, and just give you more of that context so that you have the knowledge you need to sort of make better decisions and faster decisions. And so, yeah, if you would like more information on this, again, you can ask it any question you'd like, and you can visit our website and register for early access for that. And if you want more information, you can follow up with us directly, but we will make sure that we get back to you on that and give you some early access for Ask EiQ. And just to sum up as well, to kind of summarize what Andy's been laying out for you today with the top trends, what we predict for 2026, just tariffs and limited resources will continue to be a challenge for responsible sourcing teams, but we know that there's a lot of opportunity with this as well. We know that AI and automation will be huge for teams to sort of transform their risk management and responsible sourcing, and just kind of lead the way in this year and empowering your decision making. We think that data quality and silo data resources will be kind of the main priority that need to be improved for visibility, for better risk management. And if not, people or the teams that sort of stay reactive in this sense, we think the consequences are prevalent. And that is obviously shown through the respondents that said they faced fines or violations for malpractice or sourcing issues. And also to prioritize the supplier training and adverse media scanning. As I said, we've heard from many people of how much this really benefits, and just allows for them to align their entire supply chain on their standards and get them up to speed and promote site improvement within themselves. And so, yeah, this should be one that really is at the foundation of your risk management as well. And despite program confidence being low, we believe that with the maintaining of budgets and in fact improving some, that this is a priority for stakeholders, and teams should continue to prioritize its impact. And so just wanted to thank you all so much. Also questions, of course. I did see a couple come through. Yeah, Q&A, sorry. One that I did see, Andy, that I thought would be a good one is what do you predict will be the media focus for businesses and their supply chains in 2026?
Wow, that's that's a really interesting question, actually. What is going to what will come up in the media that's going to impact businesses for this year? Yeah, I mean, I don't know, and that is not. I would say that is not a cop-out answer. I would say that is actually a meaningful answer. The way that I would look at this is I would think about as an individual how I kind of like interact with the news every day. It's one of the first things that I do in the mornings. I look at the news at my preferred news outlet, and yeah, and sometimes I have a sense of what might be there, but if I do, then that's really based on what's already there, and there are always some unknowns in there, right? And those are the really the new news. And as we look at 2026, if we're trying to predict what is going to be in the media this year and what is going to impact businesses, the only ones that we'd really be able to predict are the ones that are already there, and we're never going to be able to to predict what else is coming. We will always be blindsided, and that's kind of actually the point of doing adverse media scanning, is to turn more of those unknowns into very quickly to turn them into knowns, and to make sure that you know about them as soon as possible. We will always be blindsided by media. If we think about all of the kind of scandals and all of the the issues that have come up in the media that become then material for the businesses that are impacted, there's always a point in time when they are new, and more often than not, that is when they land first in the media. Adverse media scanning, if you're casting the net wide, and we look at pretty much every issue that could come up for your brands that would be negative and would create bad sentiment. If you're casting that net wide, if you are scanning constantly and being fed issues when they occur, you still don't know what's going to come up, but when it does come up, you know about it as quickly as possible, and you can react ahead of the pack.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we have seen so much just in the past year as well. And I feel like we will continue to see that being a point of focus in the next year. But one more that I saw before we kind of wrap up, but for teams that are trying to transition to autonomous risk management, what do you foresee as the sort of timeline from transitioning from, sorry, what does it say here? From reactive sort of manual risk management to autonomous risk management?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Again, yeah, I'm gonna give an answer that again you might think is a bit of a cop out, but I think is the right one to give. Is that this isn't something that has a beginning and an end, really, and that's for a couple of reasons. Firstly, if you think about the external factors, if we think about how quickly technology is changing, and think about the world of tech, 12, 18, 24 months ago, the kinds of things that we were talking about then, and perhaps the possibilities that, for example, we thought AI could afford us then, compared to how we are thinking and feeling at this point in time, that has moved on so much. Would you 2 years ago have been able to think about where you might want to get to by the end of this year? Very likely not. So we'll always be moving with the technology here, is one thing, and the other thing is that in terms of autonomy, and in terms of, again, fully using data and tech, I think from my perspective there's a certain kind of like North Star element to this, right? It's and again, we're talking about total supply chain confidence. We see that as the vision and that kind of North Star goal that should be out there for everyone working in the space. Will we ever get to the point where we say, yes, we're doing everything right, yes, we do have total supply chain confidence? It's likely to often feel just a little way off, and even if we're doing everything that we can, there's still going to be progress that we think we can make. So I think we will always feel like we're on this journey to some extent, and particularly then when it comes to automation, when it comes to tech, and when it comes to how you're using AI, I don't think we'll ever just be able to say yes, we are done here. I would just go back to Kevin's quote here and say what's important is not to have an outlet where you think you're going to reach the end, but what's really, really important is to make a start, to feel like you are on that journey and to feel like you are moving, benefiting from the technology that's out there and making progress towards really total supply chain confidence.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, actually. And I just definitely want to highlight that as well, that I think oftentimes when we have these webinars and sort of big discussions, it can just feel like there's so much to tackle. But really, it's just about kind of taking that first step and just using these actionable steps to just move forward. And it can be possible. So thank you so much, Andy. Really appreciate this. I found it super insightful today. I hope everyone on the call did as well. I just want to thank everyone again for joining, and just a couple quick things before we end this session. I would really encourage everyone to visit our website. We have tons of resources specifically on AI, automation, tariffs, supply chain risk report also was recently out. And again, just to remind you that we do have the top trends report that we just released that is available on the website for download. And we will be following up again with the recording of this session, so you'll be able to rewatch. And yeah, anything that you guys need or any questions you have, please do follow up directly. But we appreciate everyone's time today, and thank you all again. And thank you, Andy.
Thank
Have
you,
a good
Chandler,
day.
and thanks everyone. Have a good day.